Britain has witnessed royal scandals, bitter family divisions, and unforgettable moments inside the palace. But few announcements have shaken the nation quite like this. In a move that left royal insiders stunned, King Charles reportedly revealed a decision that could dramatically reshape Queen Camilla's future and change the direction of the monarchy forever. As questions spread across the United Kingdom, many are wondering what this dramatic decision could mean for the future of the crown. Just moments earlier, history seemed to pause. The velvet curtains of Clarence House fluttered faintly as King Charles stepped into the glare of camera flashes. His expression was heavy, his voice controlled, yet strained as he faced the nation. Then came the words no one expected, the kind that freeze time and ripple through generations. Her Majesty the Queen Consort Camilla is to forfeit her royal title, effective immediately pending a full investigation. A gasp spread through the gathered press. The room seemed to tremble under the weight of those words. Never in modern history had a reigning monarch publicly severed such a bond with such finality and such visible pain. Beside him, the Queen Mary's crown rested on its pedestal, an ornate relic glinting with the icy fire of Cullinan diamonds and rare gems. Once a proud emblem of unity, it now stood as a silent witness to division. Its brilliance contrasted painfully with the tension that filled the hall. Aides froze mid-breath. One murmured under his breath, "It's done." Outside reporters jostled and shouted questions, their voices lost beneath the solemn toll of church bells echoing across London's grey skies. Inside a royal household was unraveling. The question that burned through the air was simple, yet searing. What could drive a king to such a decision? According to whispers from Buckingham Palace insiders, the trigger was not gossip or hearsay, but something tangible and undeniable, a sapphire brooch. Not just any brooch, but one that once belonged to the late Princess Diana. It had appeared without warning at a Geneva auction, sending shockwaves through royal circles. How it arrived there remained a mystery until investigators traced its path back to Raymill House, Camilla's private residence in Wiltshire. Within hours, a secret intermediary was identified, a figure now reportedly under intense scrutiny by palace investigators. It was Princess Anne who first raised the alarm, her instincts as sharp as ever. Prince William, fierce in loyalty and protective of his mother's memory, demanded answers. And Catherine, calm, dignified, yet resolute, urged her father-in-law to act swiftly. Protect the crown, she is said to have told him quietly, no matter the cost. When the moment came, King Charles's hands trembled as he signed the decree. The pen seemed almost too heavy to hold its ink, carrying the weight of centuries of tradition, duty, and heartbreak. His voice, though restrained, carried the echo of ancient resolve. The crown must remain pure. And with that, the unthinkable became real. A few days earlier, on 8th November, the atmosphere inside London's Royal Albert Hall felt almost sacred. Soft beams of red and gold lit the room for the festival of remembrance casting. Gentle shadows over the royal family. Camilla stood beside King Charles, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if she were both partner and protector. She smiled at the hymns, bowed at the prayers, and held herself with that familiar air of quiet confidence. To the cameras, it was a portrait of unity, steady, graceful, calm. But those close enough to watch the king's face noticed something far more telling. Charles's expression did not match the warmth of the moment. It was not anger, And it was not affection. It was a kind of distance, like someone pulling back from a truth they could no longer ignore. That night, the distance did not stay hidden. It became royal action. Behind palace walls, father and son King Charles and Prince William had finally spoken with one voice. Publicly, the decision was described as administrative, a simple adjustment to royal duties, but the insiders who whispered behind closed doors all used the same word final. Outside Buckingham Palace, rain drifted through the November fog, soaking the reporters who had gathered for what they sensed would be a turning point. Inside, the Queen's private rooms remained lit long after the rest of the palace had gone dark. She had not released a statement. Perhaps she did not need to. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one wrapped in silence, a silence that exposes everything no one dares say aloud. The truth is that the decision had been made long before it was ever written down. That same evening, Charles held a private meeting with William. According to a palace aide, the conversation lasted barely 20 minutes. It ended with the king's quiet but steady declaration, "This must come from both of us, not as father and son, but as crown and heir." Within hours, the foundations of the joint announcement were drafted. It would not remove titles in the most dramatic sense. It would not openly accuse Camilla of wrongdoing. Such language could destabilize a monarchy already weakened by health concerns, public scrutiny, and constant whispers of scandal. Instead, the statement took a different shape, polished on the surface, sharp in its meaning. It spoke of integrity, transparency, and renewed dedication to service. But behind those gentle words was something far harsher, punishment disguised as procedure, mercy shaped to look like control. When the final version reached Camilla, she read it twice. She did not sign it. She did not have to. Everything she needed to understand was already buried between the lines. That night, she returned to Clarence House. Staff members reported that she dismissed her driver earlier than usual and spent the night alone in her drawing room. On a small table beside her at an unsealed envelope addressed only with 3 words, "To my king." She did not write more. She did not need to. By dawn, the corridors of the monarchy felt changed, as if something important had cracked quietly and permanently. The joint statement went public barely 100 words long, yet heavy enough to shake every newsroom in Britain. It simply announced that Queen Camilla would step back from her individual public duties and that the king and his heir stood firmly united in their commitment to transparency and the preservation of royal heritage. The public heard diplomacy. The palace heard exile. That night, Clarence House shut down its private wing. Secretaries were reassigned. Press officers were replaced. An unsettling quiet settled over the halls. Camilla refused every phone call, every offer of sympathy. Only one aide saw her standing at the window, watching the rain blur the city lights and whispering, "They've rewritten my purpose." Meanwhile, at Windsor Castle, Charles sat with William and Princess Anne for a private dinner. Cameras, no speeches, just the quiet truth between 3 people who carried the weight of a kingdom. Charles looked tired, older than usual. "It's done," he finally said. "She was never the enemy, only the storm." Anne, ever blunt, responded, "The crown doesn't survive storms through kindness. It survives through silence." William said little, but he understood exactly what this decision would cost and why it had to be made. To understand how the monarchy reached this fragile moment, it is necessary to look back, far from the cameras, far from the headlines, and deep inside the quiet rooms where real power shifts. When Charles finally took the throne, the world witnessed a man stepping into destiny and a woman stepping into the role she had waited decades to claim. For many, Camilla's rise felt like the final chapter of a long, complicated story. She had endured scandal, anger, and the persistent shadow of Diana, but she had outlasted them all. And beneath her softer public image lay a woman who had mastered the art of subtle control. She did not need to raise her voice or push her way forward. She learned instead to move with quiet certainty, guiding decisions without ever looking like the one guiding them. In the early months of Charles's reign, she was viewed as a true partner. Gracious, calm, always ready with a gentle smile. The press praised her reading room initiative, calling it proof that she was stepping into a thoughtful cultural role. But power once tasted tends to root itself in places unseen. Soon, insiders began whispering about what they half-jokingly called the Camilla Doctrine, a way of ruling through influence, persuasion, and carefully built alliances. While the public believed Charles was simply pacing himself for health reasons, those behind palace walls saw something different forming in the background. With the king's schedule shrinking under medical advice, Camilla began gathering a small circle at Clarence House. 3 people she trusted deeply: a retired journalist, a former political aide, and an old family friend. At first, these gatherings felt harmless companionship for a queen who had suddenly become one of the most watched women in the world. But slowly, companionship turned into counsel. Then counsel turned into quiet control. Report speeches and schedules started flowing through her hands before reaching the king. Her tone never changed. Polite, steady, reassuring, but the weight of her presence grew heavier in every room. Protocol officers noticed small changes. Not enough to spark alarm, but just enough to show a shift. Orders of precedence adjusted. Patronages moved. Meetings rearranged. Slowly, quietly, the rhythm of the monarchy began to revolve around her decisions. William and Catherine maintained their diplomacy, watching closely, but offering no public objection. Princess Anne, though, saw what others tried to ignore. In a private moment, she warned Charles, calling it a court within a court, a dangerous echo from royal history. Charles defended Camilla, insisting she was helping him carry the burden, not trying to take it. He trusted her completely, perhaps too completely. By late 2025, the shift was nearly invisible to the outside world, yet fully recognized by those inside it. Camilla had become a quiet center of gravity with influence, stretching from palace corridors to political offices. And with every choice, she shaped the line between support and control blurred a little more. Then, a startling revelation emerged, exposing a major discrepancy uncovered during an audit and sending shockwaves through the palace. King Charles III sat alone in the dim glow of his private library at Buckingham Palace, the silence heavy, broken only by the distant rustle of wind in the royal gardens. Before him lay a letter sealed with the royal crest, brief, formal, and cold. It carried the words of Queen Camilla's office informing him that she would not be attending the upcoming 50th anniversary celebration of the Royal Charitable Trust. The reason given was a busy schedule. Charles knew better. It was not duty that kept her away. It was indifference. That single sheet of paper, deeper than any illness he had endured. To the world, it was just another royal notice. To Charles, it was the final insult, a sharp reminder that the woman who stood beside him in public was absent when he needed her most. The flames in the fireplace flickered before his weary eyes, and his hands tightened into fists. The crown on his head had grown heavier with every passing day of betrayal. And in that moment, he vowed he would not leave this earth wrapped in deception. The memory of his darkest hours returned with piercing clarity. Early in 2024, he had lain in a quiet room at Sandringham, the pale winter light seeping through silk curtains, shadows crawling across his face. Machines beeped in steady rhythm, each sound a grim reminder that his body was failing. Cancer had dragged him to the edge of mortality, draining his strength until every breath was a labor. Yet the deepest wound was not in his flesh. It was in his heart. Camilla never came. She never called. Not a word of comfort, not a single touch of reassurance. Instead, the newspapers carried her smiling image perfectly dressed, hailed as the embodiment of royal dignity. Queen Camilla, timeless grace, the headlines declared, celebrating her as the face of stability. But Charles, staring at the ceiling of a hospital room, knew the truth those glossy pages concealed. Behind the glittering facade, she had abandoned him. She did not love the man. She loved the throne. She loved the spotlight. And with every photograph splashed across the front pages, the gap between their worlds grew more impossible to bridge. In the silence of his recovery, Charles reached for an old photo album resting at his bedside. The faded images spoke louder than any words could. There was Diana, her smile radiant, captured in the summer of 1987 at Highgrove. She did not need the jewels or the titles. She only needed him. Yet he had turned away from her devotion, swayed by Camilla's presence and by the pressures of the crown. He remembered Diana's voice, trembling yet resolute, years earlier at Kensington Palace. "If you choose her, you'll lose both." At the time, he dismissed it. Now the words returned like a curse that would not release him. In those lonely nights at Sandringham, Charles came face to face with a devastating truth. He had sacrificed love, reputation, and peace of mind only to be left with a hollow crown and a wife whose loyalty belonged not to him, but to power itself. On the cold evening of 11th October, the royal palace released a carefully worded statement. Her Majesty the Queen Consort will assist with an internal inquiry regarding the provenance of certain royal heirlooms. It sounded calm and polite, but beneath those few measured words, a storm was brewing within the walls of power. At Clarence House, the usual calm of ceremony gave way to confrontation. The Maple Room, known for its polished mahogany table and gilded portraits, had once hosted rehearsals for the king's coronation speech. That night, it was no stage for celebration. It was a courtroom. King Charles sat at the head of the table, his face set in weary resolve. To his right sat Princess Anne, her expression sharp as glass. To his left, Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, both solemn and tense, and at the far end sat Camilla, her face pale, her trademark pearls replaced by a simple gold chain, the kind of change that spoke louder than words. The silence was suffocating until Camilla finally broke it. Her voice trembling but steady. "You all think I stole something," she said. Her eyes darted toward Charles. "Do you think I stole her?" The meaning was unmistakable. Her referred to Diana the ghost that still lingered in every royal corridor. Charles' reply came slowly. His voice cracked with strain. "It's not about her," he said. It's about the crown and what people believe." Anne slid a thick folder across the table. On the front was stamped, "Confidential." Inside were papers, photographs, signatures, the kind of evidence that could not easily be dismissed. "These," Anne said, "flatly speak for themselves." Camilla's lips trembled. "These were not my orders," she said, her voice catching. William leaned forward, his tone calm, but edged with steel. "Then say whose they were. Because silence, stepmother or not, will cause more damage than any scandal." For a moment, only the slow ticking of the wall clock filled the room. Charles leaned back, eyes heavy. "Whoever signed it," he said at last, "no longer matters. Ambiguity is poison to the crown." His words fell like a verdict. Behind him, through the glass case, the imperial state crown shimmered faintly under the chandelier, half in light, half in shadow, as if judging them all. Camilla's mask began to crack. Her voice rose, breaking through the formality that had once defined her life. "Do you think I wanted this? This life, this burden, I rebuilt it for this family, for this crown, and now I am being destroyed for something I may never have even ordered." Anne met her eyes coldly. "No one's destroying you," she said. "But trust once lost rarely returns." Catherine spoke next, her voice soft but cutting. "These jewels are not just ornaments," she said. "They carry stories, memories. When one disappears, a story is erased. And once a story is lost, the crown itself grows dimmer." The clock struck midnight. A decision was made. The Privy Council would convene at dawn. Camilla would be asked politely but firmly to relinquish her title. Her reign as queen consort was over before the morning sun would rise. Charles remained in the maple room long after the others had gone. He stared at the glass case that held the crown's centuries of power and pain sealed within it. His whisper filled the emptiness. "The crown endures." Hours later, Camilla's carriage rolled through the dark countryside toward Raymill House. The night outside was silent, save for the rhythmic sound of wheels on gravel. When she arrived, she walked into her quiet room and found a photograph from her coronation. She and Charles smiling. Her crown tilted just slightly. She looked at it for a long moment, then turned it face down. "In another part of the city," Anne's voice came through the phone. "You did the right thing," she told her brother. Charles paused before answering, his tone low and tired. "It won't heal." Anne's reply came softly, like a truth too old to argue with. "It wasn't meant to heal," she said. "It was meant to protect." And in that silence, heavy, royal, and unending, the crown once again stood untouched. Dawn of reckoning. The morning of 13 October came cold, metallic, and stern. Reporters lined the gates, cameras aimed like spears. At exactly 10 o'clock, King Charles entered the Grand Hall. He was drawn, dignified, bearing decades in silence. The Queen Mary crown stood beside him, gleaming in the spotlight. In the hall were officials, press, and family. William stood directly behind his father. Catherine to his side, composed. Anne lingered, head bowed. The air felt like a funeral for a title. When Charles spoke, his voice was steady yet heavy. "With profound sadness, I confirm a decision not made lightly. The crown must remain above reproach. Her Majesty the Queen Consort Camilla hereby withdraws from all duties and relinquishes her title." Silence swallowed the room. Then, as though gravity itself shifted, he continued. This decision arises not from anger, but preservation. The crown is more than gems. It is trust between sovereign and people. That trust must never be broken. In that silence, electrified, trembling cameras flashed like lightning. The world seized the moment. Outside crowds murmured in awe and shock. Some cheered, others wept. Portraits of Diana surfaced. Floral tributes appeared at Kensington's gates. Lily's notes, even a small replica sapphire brooch. Charles paused. He turned to William. "It is time." William stepped forward, placing a velvet-bound decree on the lectern signed by the King and Privy Council. Catherine gently rested her hand on his, steadying him. Charles's final line echoed for generations. The strength of the monarchy is not measured by splendor, but by conscience. Then he bowed his head. Anne broke decorum. She moved to stand beside him, placing a gloved hand on his shoulder. The cameras caught it. The gesture became iconic. William escorted Catherine from the hall. They passed through gates under flashbulbs and chants. Long live the Prince and Princess of Wales. Their future, forged in crisis, now gleamed like a new dawn. At Raymill House, Camilla watched in silence. The announcement played her face unreadable. She removed her ring and whispered, "So it ends." Back in Clarence's house, Charles walked into the maple room. He hovered before the crown's glass, reaching out but not touching it. His reflection split among diamonds and shadow. He whispered, "Forgive me." 12 tolls of the church bells echoed across London. A reckoning, a catharsis, a rebirth. The world declared the day the crown's reckoning of legacy and duty had collided beneath diamonds that had outlived every heart that wore them. By dusk, London held its breath, neither celebration nor mourning, but something in between. The gilded gates glowed in lamplight as crowds swelled. Inside the palace knew it had obeyed protocol, but at a cost none could quantify. Charles spent the evening alone in his library. A letter lay before him, sealed to "My sons." He had rewritten it 3 times before settling on this truth. The jewels of this family are not diamonds. They are honesty, compassion, restraint. Should any of those falter, the crown loses its radiance. He sealed it, closed it, and let the silence settle. At Kensington Palace, William and Catherine prepared for their first public appearance since the storm. Their composure was quiet, their strength muted. Catherine's gray gown caught the evening light. On her wrist lay Queen Elizabeth's pearl bracelet, a symbol of legacy passed onward. William squeezed her hand. Mother would have been proud. For one moment, his smile felt genuine. Meanwhile, Camilla remained sequestered. In her sitting room, she turned off the television before the closing remarks. She gazed at that coronation photograph, now face up again. A fragile possibility flickered. Maybe forgiveness, like truth, returns slowly. And so, the crown endured, not as a flawless relic, but as something reborn. Its polish tested by crisis, its metal scarred by revelation. Because sometimes legacy is not built in grandeur, but in the courage to look inward and to act even when everything risks shattering. This is not merely a royal drama. It is a story for us all, how power must dance with principle, how loyalty can become a cage, and how sometimes the greatest reigns are those that begin through fire.